Imposter syndrome is feeling like you're going to be exposed as a fraud. You don't deserve your place. It's just a fluke that you've got this role. And even if others praise you, you downplay it. It's nothing special. We don't even think about what's going on in our subconscious and all the beliefs that we naturally have that we've grown up with.
Hi, welcome to Changing Suits. My name's Bal.
And my name's Taj.
On this week's episode, we've got our usual post-it note. So we've got a guest. As our guests will know our listeners know, Susanne, that I always have my post-it note. So today, the guest is Susanne Baxter, who is, and I have to turn it around because the title that Susanne gave me was so long, I had to write it all down. Now, she's an international trainer and researcher within mental health and wellbeing. Now, hi, Susanne. How are you today?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Come in here.
I want to say I'm really honoured to have Susanne on our podcast because she has got a wealth of knowledge. So thank you for coming on today, Susanne.
You're very welcome.
And just so that listeners know, Susanne and Taj are friends. I feel like we're just getting all of Taj's friends to come on our podcasts.
But she was amazing.
Fair enough. She keeps good company, obviously. Okay, so let's jump in. Susanne, so like I said, you are an international trainer and researcher within mental health and wellbeing. What does that mean?
I've researched so many different subjects, not just about mental health, but about wellbeing as well. And the things that stop us, growing, the things that, procrastination is an example. But today more so, I thought, I was thinking about imposter syndrome because it's another thing that can stop us moving forward. And especially when we think about different cultures, generations, social norms, it's a really good subject to talk about, I think.
And that is, I think you've just done the introduction perfectly because I forgot to tell listeners what we were talking about today. So it will be imposter syndrome. And I think you've nailed it on the head there. I mean, imposter syndrome within the South Asian community, I mean, I know that I suffer it. Taj has spoken about it numerous times. Taj, do you want to come in here and just talk about why we tend to discuss it ourselves?
We've seen in quite a lot of in the South Asian community, we do have this imposter syndrome where we think we do something amazing and we achieve things, and then we start questioning us why we got there and should we be there. And I have in various podcasts, I have said, oh my God, we're doing this, but should we be doing this? How did we get to this level? But before we do start, Susanne, what is imposter syndrome?
I guess the thing is we all kind of can be doubting something. So, certain circumstances like, am I going to go for that job? Do my skills match it? Or can I really buy that house? So we all have circumstances where we doubt ourselves. But imposter syndrome is more about when you sort of like you're feeling like you're going to be exposed as a fraud. You don't deserve your place. It's just a fluke that you've got this role. You're not really good enough. Or even if others praise you and say what a great job you've done, it's like you downplay it. It's nothing special. And that's where we actually sabotage our own success. So there's kind of like,
Susanne, can I just come in here? Because what you've just said, especially at the end where it's like we downplay it. I mean, me and Taj are very, very guilty of this. We do downplay it. And something that we've learned as we've been doing this podcast, there's been a few episodes that have already come up in my mind. And that's something very cultural because we have been told, look, don't oversell yourself. Don't tell everyone how brilliant you are. How do you stop that from happening when it's a whole generational cultural thing?
I think the first point is awareness, and I think I'd like to spend some time talking with you, and you think about what it was like for you as a child, growing up in your community, and think about were you given lots of praise and encouragement, or was it like no, you can't do that, you're going to be a wife at home, and the boys are going to do that? Was it about that? Was there a difference between the sexes?
No, I think, to be fair, and Taj, correct me if you think that, I think is two extremes. I don't think we were always encouraged. I know our parents, we've been very lucky. They always encouraged us to do more than we actually wanted to do sometimes. So it wasn't towards the boys can only do that. Definitely not. But we did. Taj, what do you think?
I would say when we had exam results and we done well, one of the things, and they are amazing parents, was they said, do not boast about it.
Yeah.
Do not boast, because you'll lift yourself up there, and then when something bad happens, you'll fall really, how would you say it, from such a height. So don't give people that energy or take away from that energy, and just keep it at a level field. So if something good happens, hey, something good's happened. Something bad happens, hey, something bad has happened.
I think that there's a difference between when our ego comes in and we're bragging, and when we're actually downplaying. I think those two are different things. So if you say to me, I like your hair, and I say, oh, no, this is how I always have it. It's rubbish and he's cut. That's downplaying. And that's denying your compliment. Yeah.
See,
I'm
I do that.
denying your compliment.
I find it really difficult if anyone compliments me, because I'm like, yeah. Oh, okay, you're better, sort of thing. Why is that? Why do people find it difficult to take on a compliment and just roll with it and say, yeah, I'm amazing, you're right?
See, that's the other extreme, isn't it? I'm amazing is, yeah.
The ego coming in again.
I think that's the ego coming in, yes. But you can say, I love your hair, and I can say, thank you. And I'm taking your gift of a compliment. Yeah. So I think I think those are two different things, but we can, and it is, it's very different to go in and say, well, I've done this and I've achieved that and I'm amazing. That's very different to thank you for your compliment. Yeah. So and I think.
Do you then carry on with the conversation? So I like that. Just say thank you and stay with it rather than throwing it back. I'm going to use this, by the way, because I think you're right. Why would I say, oh, no, let's move on? But would you then back up and say, okay, what would you say anything after that? Thank you.
No, I just say, oh, thank you. And then wherever the conversation's going, it will continue. But I've acknowledged that person's gifting me a compliment. Yeah. And I'm appreciating it by saying thank you.
See, one of the things is, while we've been working in changing suits and doing things for the community, I've had quite a few people come to me and say, you're doing amazing and thank you so much. And I think, I don't want to say thank you because it might look like I've got an ego. And
where's that fine line, though? That's the thing. Where's the fine line, Susanne?
We're all unique, aren't we? We are all unique. So I think we have to we have to explore and discover our own. Because like our well-being, we are all individual, and what works for me and what I'm comfortable with is going to be different for each of us, for everybody. So it is finding what am I comfortable with. But this might well go back to this thing that you were talking about as when you were doing your exams about don't brag about it, don't, and almost maybe it took you to the other extreme where I'm not allowed to say anything that I've achieved. Whereas there's something in the middle, which is sort of like the balance for you.
So do you think us this is where we're just picking your brain now, Susanne. We're like, okay, now let's analyze it. So as a community, that is a very common thing. Don't brag. Otherwise you might get something that we call najar, which is, how would you explain it in English, Taj?
Something might go wrong. So if you say something is really going well, najar is, oh God, it's going to go wrong because you're saying that it's going well. Jinxing it.
That's the word, jinxing it. Okay. So do you think that we, like you've said, we've taken it to the extreme where it's like, hey, don't mention anything because of this whole jinx thing. But essentially, we could have mentioned it, but just finished it off with a thank you rather than this is really interesting. Maybe we've just taken it as an extreme. So, you've made me think, Susanne, now.
I was going to say, there's a lot of quiet moments here for Bal, which isn't normal.
with everything, there's two extremes. There's the extreme where it's really not healthy, but there's the other extreme that's not healthy. So I'm full of my ego. I'm not even going to say thank you because it's just like, I'm not even worth that thank you.
Yeah.
And it's finding that balance in the middle. And as I said, all our points will be different. What we're comfortable with, because it's got to be comfortable with us, what we say.
I was going to say, so with imposter syndrome, it's when you're downplaying it too much. Now, what impact can imposter syndrome have on our mental health and well-being as well?
Well, if we're full of self-doubt, so if we're really doubting ourselves, I've just got this new job, and I can't ask for help because they think I'm rubbish and I'm failed, and they think I'm a phony, so I can't possibly ask for help, even though I could do with it because I don't know all the ropes yet. I haven't learned it. So that's an example of the impact it has on us. And then we start to worry, because so it can build up on our well-being and our mental health. Another thing that we sort of like, we've got this inability to realistically assess our competence and our skills. So it's like, if I don't have all the answers, no one's going to trust me. No one's going to believe in me. So I need to know everything and be perfect, And again, that puts a lot of pressure on somebody. Perfectionism is one of the, that's an issue in imposter syndrome. I can't just be good enough. I've got to be perfect at this. Yeah. And there are times when you would spend so much energy and effort on something, actually it didn't really need that amount of energy and effort. So again, berating our performance about never being good enough or having to be 100% all of the time, again, that can impact our well-being. And then sort of like sabotaging our own achievements, by setting challenging goals that aren't realistic, and then we're just going to beat ourselves up because we haven't achieved them.
On the sabotaging, it's really interesting. Again, going back to a few episodes where it's a case of, especially within the South Asian community, it's very much, okay, get educated, get married, have kids, and that, you've done everything you need to do. Get a good job as well. Yeah, go to sleep, you're done. But that is something within the South Asian community that we're well aware has caused a lot of heartache and problems for individuals because of that. Again, sabotaging yourself. So it's really interesting how you can link all of this to...
Because the divorce rates, I don't even know if this links with it, but the divorce rates are pretty high in the South Asian community. Could that be because people don't think that they measure up, or it's going the other way where we're becoming overconfident? It could be loads of reasons. But getting married, maybe you don't feel that you're I don't know, on the same level.
I guess you can look at the reasons you get married. Are there still agreed marriages? Is it your connection with somebody, or is it somebody else's? Is it somebody else's belief that you will be compatible with each other rather than your own belief? Yeah, and then there's like, is there? If you do have arranged marriages, is that something that still happens? Let me just check in with you. Is that?
It does, but not to how it's described. You meet the person. It isn't like you see them on the day.
Okay.
It's very much like,
let's call it like the Tinder. There we are. Tinder is the what we call in the South Asian community the vacholan, which is the person that introduces you, and then you go off and have those. And that's obviously not for everyone, but that generally is how it works. And that,
but even that itself, can be, there can be an element of imposter syndrome. It's somebody else is making a decision for you, so you're not. Perhaps you might feel, I'm not good enough to make this decision myself. Somebody else has to make it for me. So it's like you're working alongside somebody else's beliefs and attitudes. And I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm sure there's some amazing marriages, but it's just like the awareness of ourselves and how comfortable we are with what we're encouraged to do through cultural norms, through social norms, through how it was when we grew up, even generational norms, because I'm sure that the way you are with your children is different to the way your parents were with you.
I was going to hit on this because I feel my daughter's got imposter syndrome. How do we break the cycle? Because I think to her, I do actually say to her, if you do well, don't go around boasting it to everyone. Say it at home, say it within your family, and we're happy for you. Yeah, be proud of it. Have the ego at home, but don't say it outside.
Can I come in here? So I had, this was a while ago, and I had, so my daughter had an assembly, and she didn't tell me quite that she had a really good role in it. I came home and I said to her, I go, oh, how come you didn't tell me? Obviously we'd watched it, and so we'd seen, we're like, okay, she's had quite a substantial role. And she goes, oh, it's fine. It's nothing. I'm like, oh, and exactly what you've just said there, Taj, is it something that we are then rubbing up on our kids where it's like, hey, don't make a big deal.
Yeah, we thought
and we've just totally done the same thing. Yeah.
We've done the same thing.
So how do you change that? Because it's happening.
Yes. I guess the first point really is, first of all, I would like to say a little bit about where it's come from. So, where imposter syndromes come from. So the first research that was done with imposter syndrome was back in the 70s. And it was two psychologists who were in a university. So they were studying the people who were taking their degrees, etc., and their masters in university. So they thought that this was only something that impacted people who were doing really well in their lives, high achievers. Since then, there has been so much research done. It doesn't matter whether you're male, female, what your background is, what your skill level, and even sort of like culturally where you come from. There can be all sorts of different factors that impact somebody that they end up with imposter syndrome. I'm not so sure about how many guys have imposter syndrome compared to women. Yeah, and I just want to throw another sort of spanner in the works with that one. So if you think about how you treat your children, Taj, because I know you've got a boy and a girl. Yeah. So if your kids fall over, do you treat them differently? Is your son encouraged, brush him off and he's fine, just get on with it? And then your daughter's, come on, you're okay.
No, but I think my husband does, because quite a lot of the males in our family are like, man up, get on with it. Whereas I cuddle him and kiss him, and I'm told that I'm making him into a bit of a mummy's boy. Whereas if that I do with my daughter, there's none of that element. I carry on doing the same for both of them. But from the males, generally it is, oh my God, why are you doing that so much?
See, that's the same with me. It was quite funny actually. Last week, I'll tell you this story because you've just asked it. My daughter, so we were just outside school, and I ended up talking to someone, and she's trying to pull me to come on, let's go. And she sort of fell over on. It wasn't a road; it was just going into the school, so it wasn't as serious as it sounds. But she just fell. So instead, I turned around and said, get up. Like she knew she was being silly, and I was like, no, I'm not having you crying about something where you were obviously. So I agree. I mean, I feel like I'm treating them the same. However, if it is quite clearly they've got hurt and they need it, I will go in and cuddle them and all this sort of stuff. And I think my husband's slightly less like that. But yeah, now thinking about it, maybe he's more cuddly towards my daughter rather than my son. But I'll have to think about that one properly. Go on, Susanne, analyse us, tell us. You asked us a question. You've got So what has that meant then, Susanne?
Yeah, so how do these boys grow up? Do boys grow up brushing things off? Because that's what they've learnt to do. They've learnt to, I messed up on that report. That's okay. I can sort it out. Whereas a girl will be, oh my gosh, what have I done? So is there a natural part of us or something that the way we're brought up as children?
Because my son, he'll do really bad in a test and he does not care. Whatever. And then my daughter, oh my God, you won't hear the end of it. And they're pretty young, and I'm already seeing those signs.
But then you're right. I get that. But then if that happens, then I usually do tell my son off. I'm like, just care. So, but he still doesn't. So what? Okay. Interesting. So what do we do with that then, Susanne?
Is it part of the personality? Because we've all got our children, from the day they're born, they've got their own personality, and that shines out more as they get older. So is it a part of personality? Is there something that we can do to make a difference? Because we want them to be rounded when they're adults. We want them to be able to manage when things go wrong. And we certainly don't want them to be experiencing imposter syndrome. We want, so it's like thinking about, let's start to think about the things that we can do for ourselves if we are experiencing imposter syndrome, and how that can help us, so that we've also got an awareness around perhaps things that are happening with the children. I'm not so sure about that, but yes. So I think the other thing to think about is, where does imposter syndrome show up for you? Because for some people, it's in the workplace. Just in the workplace is the issue. Yeah. For other people, it might be romantic relationships is where it shows up. So where do you have your most self-limiting beliefs?
I think in workplace, I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I don't care. I know what I'm doing. I would say more personal stuff.
See, mine is the opposite. No, mine is the opposite. I feel like I sort of downplay work stuff. At home, I don't know. I've never.
So what kind of confident with work stuff?
Okay, just so I can clarify. So when you say personal stuff, can you give me an example? And then I'll be like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I do, because I can't think of any personal stuff where there might be imposter syndrome.
Well, just how you are like in your relationships. Are you very confident in your romantic relationship? Or do you sort of like think you're a bit of a fraud sometimes? Or do you think you haven't got the answers, or you haven't got right to an opinion, or, this person knows more than you?
Oh no, I don't.
My husband knows more than me. I know that for a fact.
No, I was going to say opposite. There's no way that I think that his opinion's more important than mine. Poor guy, he's probably got the imposter syndrome there. Maybe.
It's not funny.
That's not funny. That isn't funny. No, I think it's definitely work then. If we're looking at it, then it's probably
I'm surprised about that.
No, I think I downplay. So if someone says, "Oh, you're doing the same thing as you said earlier, Taj," if someone says, "Oh, you guys are doing really," I'm like, okay, that's fine. Let's just carry
we
on.
do downplay it. We do downplay
definitely more work. Definitely more work. What other things can we test ourselves on, Susanne? I'm like, I need to analyze my life now.
So it's thinking about your self-limiting beliefs and the impacts of them then. So if you have a self-limiting belief in an area where, kind of like Tad was saying, oh, we've been doing all this work, but it's just okay. It's all right. We're not, downplaying it. So what impact does that have on you if you are downplaying the amazing thing that you've gifted the Asian community?
You don't realize that what our work is doing is helping others. And I have to say, thinking about it, when we do get feedback, and we do get it regularly, where someone's
We're
like,
shocked every time, aren't we?
it's true. We're like, oh no, it's fine. It's not a big deal. It's true, actually, because anytime we have feedback, it is like, oh my God, it's amazing. Someone's actually said that it's
we do it every time anyone says, oh, thank you, this has really helped me. I'm like, oh my God, this really helped the person.
In fact, me and Taj have had those conversations where it's like, okay, don't act so shocked in public as we do. And every time we make a whole episode about how shocked we are that someone said something nice about it. Okay, so that's the impact it's having. You don't realize that it's having a positive thing. Okay, go on, carry on with this, Susanne. I think I'm liking where we're going with this.
So the other thing is, what are your attitudes to success and failure?
I think when there's a failure, I think it hits us like a ton of bricks. Well, I can say that for myself.
No, not so much. I don't think so.
I don't think you recognise that it hits you like a ton of bricks.
No, but I feel like this is like a therapy session on an episode. I feel like when something doesn't happen, that we do pick ourselves up and get on with it and find different solutions. And I think that's happening faster and faster because we're moving so fast.
Yeah, as an organisation, yeah.
Yeah. So that's your answer, Susanne. I think it's fine. Although it's funny how we went straight to the failure before we went to the success, which is interesting.
Because we're negative people?
Not at all. And the other thing that I didn't get the chance to finish to say was that, think about where do those attitudes that you have come from? So I'm going to go back to this thing that Tad was saying about you're not allowed to express your successes. Yeah. So that's an attitude that you were taught as a child. How does it play out as an adult for you? Is it a belief that is still working for you, or does it need tweaking a little bit?
I think we're talking to our podcast guests, starting to say, hey, we're doing okay. Slowly, not as fast as we should be doing, but on the odd occasion.
See, I think it's already impacted. Even with your previous question, we went straight for the failure before we went for the success. Yeah. We haven't even answered the success one yet. So yeah, we haven't even mentioned about how we feel with success. So that is an interesting one, Susanne. So it obviously has had an impact, hasn't it? So how do we change this? Okay, go on, Taj.
Like, what has been our success?
I feel proud of the work that we do, but on top of that, when we do get that feedback, so how do we even identify that?
Yes. So if you start thinking, let's just take your success as an example with this, because it's something that was been mentioned. Yeah. So if Taj, oh no, this is fine. No, oh no, this is okay. No, we're just doing our job. Yeah. And if you think, well, how does that impact me when I say those things? So you start to think about, in this situation, when I notice this, how does it impact me? What might my beliefs be that I react and respond in this way? So what is your belief, Taj, that you are responding, no, this is fine? What might be the belief you have that you respond like that? So we have to look.
I just don't want to be seen to have an ego, or, yeah, I would say I don't want to be seen for the other person to think that I've got an ego, that I think I'm doing amazing. I think that's the core of it, to be honest.
But that can be broken into two parts of, I think I'm doing amazing, not necessarily as an ego. If you're, I'm the greatest, yeah, that's an ego.
Yeah.
Look at me, aren't I great? Yeah, whereas just, you might be doing amazing. Is there anything wrong with saying, actually, at the moment, this is just going amazing? Or
Also,
is the
I
belief
think
behind it that if you say that, something will go wrong?
that as well, because I think we've always been the nudger thing about it being jinxed. I think that's always an element of how we've grown up, isn't it, Belle?
It's interesting. So it's that whole moderate approach rather than going too high, too low, isn't it? It's about being neutral and taking it.
Yeah.
And Susanne, with the experience that you've had, just out of interest, I mean, actually, let's carry on. What's the next part of this process? Let's carry on and analyze Taj.
So yeah, so it's starting to, it's a continual process of starting to question these beliefs as you start to notice them. As you practice, we don't even think about what a belief is behind something. So this is something that takes a while for us to start understanding what that means to us, what our belief might be, and how we might change that belief slightly, perhaps to start with at first, just to tweak it so it's more accepting. So we're being kinder to ourselves, perhaps. Yeah. So perhaps it's about self-compassion that comes in.
Sorry, Susanne. So how would we, in regards to this one, which we're talking about with Taj's example, how would we change the belief there? Because obviously it's that whole thing of when we were younger, we wouldn't say too much because we didn't want to say that, you show that we've got a big ego. But then how would we change that belief then?
Yeah, so the belief might be, I can't possibly think that things are good because then they'll fall, then they'll fail. So is that a realistic belief? It has to be comfortable with you. So it might be, I'm comfortable to believe that at the moment it's good. It doesn't guarantee it's always going to be good, but at least at this moment, I'm acknowledging at the moment things are good. So in different ways, where our belief changes from, I can't possibly believe it's good because it's going to go bad, to, well, I can believe it's good at the moment. We might have challenges along the way, but at least at this point in time, things are well. So a belief around things are good at the moment, that might change. Does that make sense?
It's like appreciating the moment rather than thinking what's going to happen next.
I'm going to throw my computer out the window in a minute.
Listeners, so that you know what's going on,
yes,
the internet is playing up.
Yes, so we're talking about, noticing our beliefs. Are they limiting for us? That was the next thing that we were looking at. We were looking at how can we become kind to ourselves. So if you're a person who's not ever learnt to be kind to yourself, you're not going to look in the mirror and say, aren't you wonderful? Because that's too big a jump from where you are. But and for people who struggle with self-worth, it's what's the next step? So how can I be a little bit kinder to myself on a journey to self-compassion, rather than I'm going to be totally self-compassionate? It's like, what's the next step in that journey? How can I be kinder to myself than I was today? How can I be kinder to myself, imagining how I'd speak to my best friend? How are you kind to yourself? What's your thoughts around self-compassion and being kinder to yourself?
When I've heard this before, where you look in a mirror and then you say nice words of, oh, I look nice today, my hair looks nice. And I've always thought, I get it, but I've always found it really cheesy. I've never done it. So it's from the outside, I've always been like, oh, it's a bit uncomfortable doing something like that.
But no one's going to be looking at you.
I don't know. I just find maybe it comes back to that whole, again, that piece of imposter syndrome where you don't like saying nice things to yourself, I guess. Maybe it is that. I'm going to have to, after this recording, I'll have to go in the mirror and say something nice to myself. I'll be like, okay, I'll have to give it a go and see how it goes. But it is about that practice, just trying it and seeing if it works.
But I like it's the mindset, isn't it? It's changing your mindset, enjoying the moment now rather than keep looking forward, as we were saying. It's just, a different way of thinking. And that's essentially what we're doing, changing the way that we're thinking.
So it's important. If we have a fixed mindset and we always stay the same as we are, we won't move forward, we won't change, we won't grow. But a growth mindset is, how can I look at this differently? What's the first step of that journey for me? And I guess not everybody wants to look in the mirror and say nice things, but it's also about the steps to that. What's the first step if that's too big a step? You know, it might be, I'm just going to be a bit kinder. Rather than calling myself a daft bat today, I'm going to call myself, that was a bit daft, and take off the bat. So that's the first point of the first step of that journey.
And it's language, isn't it, Susanne? Because this is something that I've realised is so important. Whichever topic we're talking about, the language that we're using is so important.
Yeah, connotations of words, huge. And again, it's cultural, it's social. I mean, we would never have, like, cool. Oh, that's cool. We would never have used that 20 years ago. That would mean we're cold.
Yeah.
Gay's another one. You know, gay's gone through a process of having different meanings, hasn't it? So very much to be aware of the words we use, and the, you know, if they, you know, and some people believe that there's an energy. So if you're negatively thinking about somebody, that's just the same as negatively talking about them or negatively speaking to them. So, you know, if we think that by being negative to somebody is going to impact them, how is that being negative and thinking to ourselves going to impact?
So that's a really good point, because we usually think how it's going to impact the other person. We never think how what we talk about or what we say will impact ourselves.
Susanne, can I ask, is there a difference in cultures, as in, is there more people from the South Asian community that tend to have imposter syndrome, or not so much? Or does it just affect everyone? Because I know you mentioned it is something that is very widespread. I mean, is there a difference in cultures and being affected by imposter syndrome?
Without knowing too much about it, I think there probably is a difference between different cultures, but I think all cultures have their own issues.
Yeah.
So, for example, I remember my parents expecting so much of me that they told me what subjects I would take when I chose my subjects at school. I wasn't allowed to choose those myself. I wanted to take cookery, home economics. I loved cooking. I absolutely loved it. But no, that was such a waste of time for me that I wasn't allowed to do it. And so I think that, you know, depending upon your own generation, your own culture, perhaps do you live in a big city or a small community? Do you live in a tribe? You know, do you live on an island and you're on your own with just a few people? You know, wherever we are, I think there are differences that can positively help us to grow, or can actually have negatively impacted us growing up.
Susanne, as we come to the end of this podcast, and like I said earlier, I feel like it's been a bit of a therapy session, which in itself is really interesting because, again, along a number of the topics that we talk about, a lot of people have said, look, I did get therapy. I did go out and talk to someone externally. And I think you've made I think that's been so relevant in this podcast, and something that sort of opened up my eyes as well to say, look, raising that awareness, firstly, like we were saying earlier, is so important. But whether we can raise awareness by ourselves, I don't know. It seems to be a lot harder. It's only when someone sort of says something, you're like, oh, actually, that's just triggered something and opened my eyes up to something that might have happened in the past.
Yes. So first point, it's an NLP saying, the first point of change is awareness. If you're not aware of it, you'll do nothing to change. And it might be that you chat to somebody you trust. Oh, I've heard this podcast today. They were talking about this. What's your thoughts on that? Because that's the other thing that we don't do, is we would never dream of saying to somebody, I've got a bit of an imposter syndrome going on about this thing we've got to do at work. Is it affecting you as well? And it would be, you know, surprising that actually other people say, do you know what? I do it myself. And that can be a reassurance that we're not the only person who feels like this in these circumstances. So actually, sometimes it can be good to share with somebody you trust and have a conversation with them and start to open it up.
And so what other, like I said, as we come to the end, so open that conversation. Is there anything else that you'd tell someone to do to try and reduce that imposter syndrome?
I think I've gone through the main things are sort of like, affirmations is another thing, is to sort of like, what's the affirmations you can say with your new beliefs? So today I am going to be kinder to myself today. Or I am doing the best I can, and that's good enough. So we can have things that we repeat to ourselves in certain circumstances. So really speaking, it's about self-assessment, continuing to notice our thoughts, looking at our self-worth, maybe having some mantras or affirmations, maybe one of your post-it notes on the fridge, that every time you go past, that's a reminder of, looking after myself, and be kinder to yourself.
Perfect.
If you're also, there's a TED Talk. It's TED Talk talks Elizabeth Cox, What is Imposter Syndrome? It's a little cartoon about 4 minutes. That might be something that people want to look at, or to research it themselves on the internet if they want to know more.
Perfect. And we will get that link and put the link out when this episode goes out. So that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on today, Susanne. Like I said, this has been a bit of a session for us to really think introspectively about our lives and why these limiting beliefs have popped up even till this day. And we will. I am going to practice the things that you've said, because I've heard them so many times, and I do need to. It's obviously having a massive impact on us as individuals as well. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for inviting me.
That's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.
Follow us on Instagram and Facebook, changing_suits, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.